Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anirban Bhattacharyya, founder and CEO of Amplo Global Inc. On behalf of Inturi Global, Amplo Global, and Trinomics, I would like to thank all of you for joining today's webinar. Today, our topic is about how to unlock cash and enhance supply chain resilience for your organization. This is, of course, the first sequel webinar post our April 13th presentation. We have a very good number of registrations, over more than, I think, more than 300, and most of them are from various sectors of the industries. So before I introduce to our panelists and speakers, I would like to set the objective of the session. It's not only to analyze our existing state, but also to be ready for another natural calamity or any emergency state. We all need to survive short-term to mid-term. We have to revive mid-term to long-term and thrive long-term. Today, we will discuss the first part of our combat tactic, which is survive. We have a pretty full agenda today. We have three more panelists besides me. We have Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta, Senior Partner, Inturi Global, Mr. Ravi Prasad, Head of India Trinomics, and Ms. Radhika Goel, Inturi Global. So let's quickly take a look of our agenda today. It's pretty informative. We will be taking your feedback on this theme throughout the webinar, and therefore we'll have some polling questions to get the feel of the room. Each question will be visible for 60 seconds, and you will immediately be available to see the results on your screen. Our speakers today will be covering three critical topics: the challenges and risk the supply chain due to demand slump, role of people and technology in building resilience, and enabling the value chain using technology. Then Ambarish will take you through our approach, which was developed after conducting in-depth research and taking expert opinions. The cycle of revival is a structural approach one can take to overcome the crisis. Some hygiene factors for this webinar would be the audio video has been turned off for the attendees to enable a smooth flow and minimal disruption. All questions can be directed to us through the Q&A bar. Kindly avoid the chat option for your questions, as it can get lost in the crowd. And also, we request you to disable your pop-up blocker if you are using the web version of Zoom. So let's get started. Let me introduce you to our three esteemed speakers. We have Professor Pulag Ghosh from IIM Bangalore. We have Mr. Rajesh Uppal, Executive Director, HR and IT, Maruti Suzuki India Limited, and Mr. Prasenjit Sengupta, CDO Trinomics, Chief Digital Officer. So before I introduce our first guest speaker, we will run a poll, and we will also publish the result. So if we can go to the next slide. Well, maybe let me introduce Professor Ghosh first. How about that? And then we'll run the poll. Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Pulag Ghosh is currently a faculty of Decision Sciences and Center of Public Policy of the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He holds the IIM Chair Professor of Excellence. Professor Ghosh serves as a Distinguished Fellow with Niti Aayog, member of National Statistics Commission, and consults corporate and government on various issues of policies relating to finance, economics, big data, artificial intelligence, and emerging technologies and fintech. Welcome, Dr. Ghosh. So before I hand over the floor to you, I would like to run a poll. Possibly could be a cue to your session as well. So here you go. So you will have 60 seconds, and I'm going to publish the poll right now. And your time starts now. There are two questions. What part of your supply chain is hedged against risks to ensure cash flow? And which supply chain financing strategies is your firm considering now? You may have to scroll up and down a little bit on your screen. You have 30 more seconds to go, 15 seconds to go. I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to publish the results as well. There are 2 questions, so here you go. So we have the results, Dr. Ghosh. I would like to hand over the floor to you. So thank you so much. Professor, please feel free to start. Yeah, Dr. Ghosh, maybe.
Let's just give him 2 minutes. Anirban, perhaps we can move on and then come back.
Yeah, we can do that too if Mr. Uppal is here. So
I'll coordinate with him offline and then try and get him back. Maybe we can have that as a next session.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's do that. No problem at all. So we will go to Mr. Uppal's section. Let me introduce him first, and then we will run a corresponding poll on his area, and then I will hand over to Mr. Uppal. So why don't we share the screen, Akhil, and thank you so much. So Mr. Uppal is a technology professional and IT evangelist who is a futurist at heart. He drives both the IT and HR functions at Maruti Suzuki India Limited. He has over 35 years of experience in corporate world, spanning diverse roles and responsibilities ranging from IT, logistics, business analytics, digital transformation, HR, learning and development, and corporate social responsibility. A thought leader in information technology and the auto business, he is always taking a long-term vision, recognizes trends and shifts quickly. He's a keen student of global best practices, and he adapts them whenever possible to suit the local context and needs. So Mr. Uppal, before I hand over to you, we'll run a relevant poll for your area. So again, the audience, you will have 60 seconds. There are 2 questions and the time starts now. So there are 2 questions. You may have to scroll up and down a bit. You have 30 more seconds to go. 15 seconds to go. Okay, I'm going to end the poll in 1 second and I will share the results and then I will hand over to Mr. Uppal. Okay, so Mr. Uppal, there are some results coming up here. Pretty intuitive and informative. So I'm going to
interface. Okay,
I'm going to unshare it and then go ahead, Mr. Uppal.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Uppal.
Yeah,
but there is some noise, noise behind you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Anirban, for nice introduction, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with all of you. I think this pandemic has been a very, very unique. You know, in any of our risk management discussions and all, such a kind of risk was never discussed and never deliberated that how should work. Seen and managing crisis, I think we are able to come out with lots and lots of ideas on how do we come back smoothly and how do we get back to the normal as early as possible. Now, see, one very unique thing about this pandemic is, here one big crisis is that, the health of an individual people at the danger. So the whole, anything we need to do to make sure that the safety of people in your whole new design has to be taken care of. That's a very fundamentally different way this kind of crisis is coming up, and we need to really work on this kind of thing. Now, we as an automotive company has been really working in a very traditional way of, very strong partnership model with our all partners, whether it's on sales side, whether in our supplier side. So it's always, in this kind of typical automotive mode and a Japanese way of working, I think there has been very trust and shared kind of vision and shared kind of working together is something has been very clear way of working for us. So instead of our partners over here working, instead of you and me, we work as a we together and all. Give some examples at this point of time. See, there are a lot of cash logged in into the various incentives and various work for our distributor. We release that from day one so that they have all the money available to manage their businesses. Similarly, for our supplier side also, we made sure that they manage their whatever supplies we got. Instead of getting into a force majeure clause, we said let's pay them immediately so that they should not find difficulty in such a kind of environment. And also helping and them to really be very clearly on come back to normal with a very strategic way to go into, or very easiest way to go into. So one very clearly we worked together was on how do we really teach them, how do we take them along to ensure that our recovery becomes smoother for all of us. So all the SOPs should be made for in the new normal. All the compliances need to be done with all the government regulations. There's a very common forum where we have been doing that, and making sure that they all learn from that. Even up to the point of that, we as the IT team, we created something called Wellness Mitra app for all the employees of us, which is again released to all dealers for or suppliers for their employees, and for both dealer and suppliers for their employees, so that they can track the health of all their employees before they come back to open. So that instead of everybody doing the same work, can we really work together? And also that partnership kind of work has been very solid. We are working for us, and it has been really giving us result and giving a lot of confidence that when we come back to normal, I think it is much more smoother to handle that. But coming specific to the issues and areas which we have been focusing on at this point of time to really rebuild and redesign our system at this point of time, I think at this point of time, the digital way of working, I guess everybody is now saying the collaboration via electronic digital media or working together on this kind of mode has been very, very well accepted, whether it is the collaboration or whether it is learning or whether it is so the adoption of digital going forward has become a new normal kind of thing. And also automation and technologies like RPA, artificial intelligence, or the analytics kind of work which we were doing for last so many months together. I think in this period that got much more escalation now, and then it is getting into a next level for implementation. And the supply chain are being seen. How can we work without real presence or real physical presence? Now that's the mode of change which we are seeing happening in our industry and in our own supply chain. So the whole simple question is, how do we simplify and how do we optimize? I think these are the two buzzwords which we have been seeing to it, to make sure that we are cost effective in all our new redesign which we are working on, and there are any project which is being done at this point of time. Second, I think important part will be that the volatility and the flexibility will be the order of the day. So going forward, the supply chain has to be agile. You never know which part of the supply chain will get disrupted. You need alternate sourcing, you need alternate way of working, very quick changes to happen and all, to really make sure that we adapt to the new reality as early as possible. Now, as in offices, work from home has become a new way of working. Similarly, in all our, we need algorithms and all the transparency and visibility in our whole supply chain to make sure that all flexibility is managed by all of us. Similarly, inbuilt transparency, inbuilt trust, inbuilt the design of our supply chain in a way that we enable that agility and the flexibility to be adopted as fast as possible into the organization. I think that's very, very critical for us at this point of it, as part of keeping as a design. Third, and while doing so, I think since I said, people health is at the center of things around, so the new supply chain design will happen without people in mind. So the automation required to really do the processes will get adopted, or will need to be adopted much more, so that it becomes safer and it becomes without person to really manage in the supply chain going forward. coming back to resources part, in such a uncertain environment, I think hiring pattern I see is going to change a lot. Maybe selective and much more outsourcing will become an order of the day. Maybe you have to get in for a smart contracting for a task than really hiring for the life. I think that's the kind of change we need to handle that. Working in a best optimal way, some part in physical presence, somewhere from home or work from anywhere will become institutionalized in organization like manufacturing, which were never seen this kind of way of working. Going forward, instead of very large team, we are going to look for a very small teams working and getting into a small group working across and all. But while doing so, employee health, care for employee will get a far more position in the organization than it was seen till now. I think the investment on employee health will also increase a lot going forward to managed by the large organizations like us. So keeping people in the center while designing all our new strategy will become an order of a day, and we see that happening in a big way in organization like us. So in nutshell, in order to handle volatility, unlock the cash by optimizing our entire ecosystem, by redesigning, rebuilding, rethinking the processes, keeping resources at the center, people at the center, and work it out, the automation from there is a few thoughts I have. That's all I have wanted to share. I think over to you to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Uppal. That was great indeed. I'm going to go back to Mr. Professor Ghosh. So if we can quickly go back, Akhil, that will be awesome. And thank you, Mr. Uppal. That was very informative. So Akhil, if you can share, and then we'll get started. So we already have introduced Professor Ghosh, and we had run the poll. So Professor, should be all yours as soon as we get your section. So the floor is yours, and please.
Thanks, Anirban. So I'll talk a little bit about the general risk and a bit of supply chain, and especially on the economic side of it. So if we go to the next slide. So in my opinion, these are the 4 key focus going to happen at least next 6 months to 2 years. One of the biggest problem is going to be protecting the employees. Now, when I say protecting the employees, the high-end employees are probably going to be okay. Their job pattern and the way the companies look at them and the contracting will change. But really, the bottom of the pyramid, the migration and semi-migratory employees, that has it's a two-way sword. One is the companies need to protect them so that they stay. And if the reverse migration starts happening, which has already started, then when the units are in operation, let's say from Monday or Tuesday onwards, majority of them doesn't have people who has been really a backbone of the operation. So that's protecting employees from both the side. It's going to be a big deal. Then the risk in the business. Risk in the business coming from several angles, from the cash liquidity point of view, from the demand point of view, and as well as from the supply chain point of view, right? Supply chain is going to be greatly disrupted, and different industries will get affected in a different magnitude though. And the fourth thing, which is probably going to be more prolonged than 1 year or 2 years, is the demand slump. If you remember, before even COVID hit, particularly our country, the demand slump was happening, and it picked up in a big way. So these are the 4 key things which is going to shape the economy as a whole in next couple of years. Next slide. So in supply chain, some companies are going to do better. And so for example, those who have already a diversified supply chain from a geographic perspective, they will probably reduce the supply side risk from any one country or region. and they have multi-sourced key commodities or strategic components to reduce their reliance on any one supplier. At the same time, there will be some companies who are better prepared than others. These companies have built strong relationship with suppliers, have put digital supply chain systems, and more digitized in the network. Then there will be other companies or the rest of the companies which are kind of scrambling, right? On top of that, the 3 points which will make them more vulnerable is governments or policymakers' confusion on essential, and when actually the lift from essential to semi-essential to completely non-essential, that part taken care of. And because government is opening, which is rightly so, cleverly based on areas which are in green zone, and the majority of the time it may happen that the supplier's plant may be inside or near the hotspot. So how does it work out? And obviously may not be able to arrange for raw material and labor because the entire network may not be realized in this scenario, right? So these are some of the essential problem going to happen, and let's see how it can be worked out down the road. Next slide. So generally at this moment, at least for next 6 months, what we need to look at is probably we need to produce something which we can sell within the border and not maybe cross state. That may be one takeaway, at least to survive for next 6 months when it opens up. Understanding and undertaking scenario planning for better understanding your liquidity and how we can, so that for big companies it's much harder. For smaller companies it's probably comparatively easier. And focus on the cash to cash conversion cycle. Revisit your variable cost, which is definitely what I hear from the ground, almost all of them are doing, and extend payables intelligently. This is another big thing. Whom do I pay first? With whom I can pay a little bit later? Because that also has this entire relation chain, doesn't need to be broken. So these are the 5-point approach. Again, this is not a longish approach, but probably for 6 months or something, this is what we have to, every company need to be focusing on. Next slide. So some observations, with conversation from the industry, what they're trying to do is they're kind of trying to do a diversified vendor base. Most supply chains in India are not lean, so they have some bloated inventory. Can we use up those? Do we have the bookkeeping of those? But definitely a key challenge is going to be loss of capacity due to labor shortage. But that can be countered in 2 ways. One is if we can figure out based on heavy duty analytics and all those, if we know beforehand what are the things most sellable, and we reduce our SKU or product variation and maybe produce more of certain kind of thing, then the labor shortage can be taken care of. There is also things like things like shortage of trucks and drivers, which is going to delay the movement of goods. So these are some of the issues which needs to be taken care of in a little bit jugaad way, particularly for India, where the logistics and other things are not so great. Next slide. Now coming back to the economy. So one of the biggest not issue, but biggest, I would say, insight is that people's consumption behavior is going to change for a lot. Some of them will be temporary, some of them can be very longish. So there is some polls happened by Nielsen in US, and this is a US data which basically, as you can see from the graph, that people's consumption behavior is changing. Right now, it is changing this way. Probably I'm watching more TV or streaming at home, mainly because I'm completely at home. But once things open up, some of these is going to stay. So companies need to understand very fast that what are the things consumer is going to change, and what are the things and how I can put myself in so that I can take advantage of this new consumption behavior, which is going to be there for a while. That's very important. As an example, if we go to the next slide. As an example, here is another data points. There is like US consumer percentage change in average monthly spend since COVID-19 outbreak from January 17 till March 8. If you look at here, this is kind of, I mean, I hate to say this, but this is kind of what people like us who works on AI and all those speculated the world will look like when AI becomes a lot more, day-to-day affair. Remember when you used to say that if AI becomes heavy duty in everybody's life, then there may not be as many cars as in the road. People may not go to office every day. There will probably not be a 9-to-5 job. And COVID kind of somewhere accelerated that. Industry will embrace more AI, industry will embrace more robotics. People, because of social distancing and other norms, people's way of life will change. And we will see this kind of huge shift in the way we live, the way we talk, the way we consume, and pretty much everything. So as a result, we go to the next slide. As a result, there is going to be major pain points in the economy because this is a shock, and this shock is going to, deal with different country differently. At least for India, there is 4 things I see immediately coming up. First, people are not going to consume. Why people are not going to consume too much? Because 2 things happened during COVID. One thing happened is people realized, particularly the middle income group, realized without buying a lot of things, I can still have a decent life. And that realization is not going to go away immediately post-lockdown. So that they will hold on to it for a while. So obviously, for example, the strategy of buying 1 mobile phone every 3 months is going to go for a while. Second is the people are afraid. So today, I may not have virus and the virus is not gone post-lockdown. So people are thinking that even if everything is kind of coming to normal, virus is still there. So what if happens to me? I better rest the cash in my account or somewhere so that if anything happens to me, the cash is going to be helpful to the family. So this heavy duty mental and also realistic holding down to the cash is going to hurt the consumption driven economy like ours. But then what happens is government has to come up with a lot of packages with certain percentage of the GDP, and government doesn't have an income. So some part of that package will come from by doing, twisting the budget, but some part probably government has to innovate or bond or maybe printing money. So in this case, what will happen? The inflation is definitely going to go up. The third pain point is going to be the food shortage. So what happens is, as of now, India is doing good in terms of giving out, the rice, the dal, and all those things because we have enormous amount of hold up in Food Corporation of India. But that's going to be okay for about 6 to 8 months. Now, agricultural distress was there. Farmers, if we don't allow every farmer to produce the essential farming commodities for next 2 years, with a proper incentive from the policymaker that they're going to buy it out everything, what will happen is we will get into a food shortage pretty soon. And the agri and business will be huge hit. Farmer distress will happen. And so there's another big pinpoint in the economy. Then the fourth thing which I'm seeing by looking at some of the banks' data as fresh as last week, and this never happened in India, is that the retail non-performing assets going up. So there is a lot of default we're expecting to happen because of this, particularly because if you remember, India has a huge amount of millennials, and those millennials kind of buy things on credit, and because of the job cut, huge amount of either salary cut or job cut, majority of them will not be able to pay the EMI. And so banks, already there is some sign coming. So from the banks data, we see that there is a retail non-performing asset going up drastically, which India didn't have before. Next slide. So possible way out at this moment is heavy duty hand-holding by the government, be it local government, be it central government. So fiscal support is a must. Government has done something, need to be done more. There is some forward holding, forward uploading. There is some money, but probably government will do more. Encourage banks to extend credit to the existing business. Banks are very afraid to give loans to the new business or the new loans, but then RBI has come up to the bank, they have put more money to the bank. And the third, which is probably the most important thing out of all this, is how do we make the SME, MSME kind of stay afloat? Because they are the major job churner, right? So how do we do that? We need to have the GST refund. A lot of people's companies' GST refund is stuck, so can government do the GST refund? So these are some immediate logging can be opened up by the government, and some of this government is already thinking, and probably they will do very soon, needs to be done. Next. Now, major issue for government in reaching out to giving money to the MSME and SME is the digital footprint. So policy response should target to the Muddharatnas or below, but government problem is majority of them are not digitized. So what are the ways we can do this? Definitely now the GST is there, but GST also, as you know, millions of informal MSMEs are there, including, let's say, vegetable vendors and all those who are not on the GST. So we need to collate all this data and develop something called, if you go to the next slide, develop something called SME Bridge, which is almost done. I think in another 4 or 5 days it will be done. This SME Bridge, what they're doing is they're pulling data from GST, income tax, import-export, and to reach out the ones which are below 1 crore. PhonePe, Paytm, ToneTag, and every startup having the databases of small SMEs are getting collected together, deduplications and everything is taken out, and then the money can go slowly. Because for some reason, one of the big thing coming out that the money is limited, so we cannot allow to have duplication in sending the money. And this is one big problem. But I believe that the SME and MSME needs to be monetized much faster, and not just once. Probably we need to do 2-3 times throughout the rest of the year. Otherwise, we cannot, we will break the economy very badly. And another big problem is post-lockdown, middle income group is going to shrink. And that's another worry from the economy. Next slide. So more or less, this is where I think the pain points are going to be. So I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ghosh. That was a great session. I'm going to introduce our next guest speaker, Mr. Sengupta. Prasenjit Sengupta is the Executive Vice President and Chief Digital Officer of Tharmax Group. He is also a member of the Executive Council of Tharmax Group since 2018. Prior to Tharmax, he held the CIO position in the Volkswagen Group and also headed the group steering and governance for Asia Pac since 2012. He also had a 14 years of stint with Tata Motors. A graduate in electronics engineering, Prasenjit also has a business management degree. He also boasts of several certifications in CRM and digitization. And what I will do right now, I will run a poll and then I will hand over to Professor Sengupta. So the poll will start now. 40 more seconds. There are 2 questions here. The time stops now. I'm going to publish the results as well. So Mr. Sengupta, the 2 questions are answered, and here are the results on your screen. I'm going to unshare the results, and Mr. Sengupta, you can go ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anirban. I hope I am audible.
Yeah, very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. So these are unprecedented times for all of us, and I need not repeat the challenges that every industry is going through. I'll briefly touch upon the impact on our company, which is primarily in the heavy and medium engineering industry. We have projects and services that are associated with large-scale utility setups. and they are mainly for enabling manufacturing operations that run across energy and environmental sectors. With this crisis, both our demand and supply chain have been impacted simultaneously. On one side, our customers are facing a very severe constriction of their demand of finished goods, which range from oils to fertilizers to papers to textiles, to just name the industry, and it is getting constricted. The only saving grace right now remains the food and beverages, the dairy and the pharma, which are continuing to operate in, let us say, with certain direction, certain minimum direction. On the supply side, the impact is very hard, both from the MSME dependence that we have from an industry perspective, as well as the labor position, which we are all aware of. This has impacted both our order bookings and revenues, and of course, the profitability. The focal point of operations have also changed considerably with cash as the central piece of management. New aspects like technology, work from home, work processes, etc. are the new mantras. And hence, I talk about how we have worked towards keeping the lights on while we have been working from home for a heavy engineering firm like ours, where actually a few months ago, even Skype was being very rarely used as a technology. So Akhil, maybe we can go to the next slide. Okay. So there have been some functions where we have been able to move to work from home operations in a good way. They are the entire sales and marketing functions, the service functions of the sales, the services, the support, and most of the shared services across HR and finance. Pretty much all the areas that you see, which is marked in dark green, are the areas where we have been able to make a substantial headway in moving towards a work from home scenario. Some functions like the proposal management, engineering, and procurement, which you can see is highlighted in the light green, we have definitely enabled the work from home features, but they are not being utilized completely. And most of the larger reasons that can be attributable to it is because we have been used to working in a much more manual and collaborative way. And all of a sudden, within a few weeks' time, it is very difficult for us to switch gears and come completely on an automated way. And finally, we'll see there are certain red boxes, which are primarily the manufacturing, the supply chain, and the EPC. And these are the areas which are so heavily people dependent, especially in a company like ours, that they have largely remained non-operational during the entire period of lockdown so far. Apart from a few factories here and there, primarily from the chemicals area, where we have been able to produce certain things, mainly for the pharma sectors. However, what has become very, very important and critical are all the collaboration tools. And they have become the stars of the lockdown, so to speak. The Teams usage grew from almost nothing to 3,000 on a daily average. Even the ERP usage has increased, and we actually saw over the year end, that is 30th and 31st of March, almost like more than 2,000 people working simultaneously on the ERP systems. Also, the engineering side, it had a slow start, but after, let us say the beginning of April, we have seen a pretty good usage of the engineering systems also. And we can see almost like 300, 400 people on a daily basis who are using these engineering systems. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So here you will see the logos of the systems that we have been using, the technologies that we have been using across the different functions of our organization. So some of the native cloud systems, let me put it that way, like the Salesforce for the sales and the services, the success factors for HR systems, etc. They have really enabled a full focus work from home system. A way of working. So we have been able to do the appraisals, the goal settings, the online learning courses, and all the sales functions. They have been able to continue without any break in steps. Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, VPN, and Citrix They have been actually the cornerstones for us to handle all sorts of the system connectivity, collaboration, and even the company events for the last 45 days. In fact, we just concluded a live event of more than 4,000 people yesterday using the Microsoft Teams. Other systems like Oracle and Infor ERP that we are using, they can also be used and they can be connected. As I mentioned, they are being connected using VPN. Siemens Rulestream, which is primarily for the proposal management, and the Dassault Innovia, which is for the PLM, they are all ready and they are, let us say, remote ready in a way. But the usage has been a little less because we will also have to revisit the work processes and we will also have to eliminate the manual interventions which were part and parcel of the normal working so far. From the perspective of the engineering systems, as I said, it took a little bit of time, but we could also manage to get the AutoCAD systems working through the Citrixes and the VPNs. And the engineers are now able to work from home. Some other areas like the MES, which is again the Dassault Acquiso that we are using for manufacturing, was not much used. So even though there are certain features there which can be used for work from home, but since the factories itself were closed, so these systems were not used. Supply chain has been an area where we have not yet invested in a lot of digitalization or online systems, and that will remain as a focus area for us moving forward. Let us go to the next slide, please, Akhil. So finally, what do we do going ahead? We will be working on a three-pronged strategy. The first, of course, will be to enable work from home as a way of life rather than only for an emergency situation. All the functions will coordinate to enable infrastructure, policy change, and system adequacy to help towards this objective. We are already deliberating internally and we will be forming a cross-functional team to make this happen very soon. The second will be how do we move towards removing any overheads of manual interventions or duplications. This will also mean a shift towards the basic or the vanilla functionalities of the systems as much as possible. Because what has happened so far is because of the nuances of the processes and because of the way that the people had got used to working in a certain way, we had also moderated and modified the base systems to suit our ways. But now we can realize, especially in a time like this, that it becomes extremely important to go back to the basics. Look at how much of the functionalities we can use as a best practice of the system providers and how much of, as I mentioned, the vanilla functionalities, so that the least amount of manual intervention can be required and we can move very smoothly into a work from home kind of a situation. The third and the most impactful would be to have a complete rethink of the business priorities and also the product offerings. They can be enhancements of the current portfolio, or they can also be the creation of new portfolios altogether. And we will be working towards that also. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. I thank you all for patiently listening to me. And thank you, Anirban, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dasgupta. Thank you very much. That was great. So our next speaker is Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta. I would like to quickly introduce Mr. Dasgupta, Senior Partner in Inturi Global Consulting. He is the founder and senior partner at Inturi and has over 30 years of work experience as a management leader consultant. He was a partner and national leader of consulting both at KPMG and PwC. Welcome, Mr. Dasgupta. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Am I audible well?
Yes, you are. You are.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Perilous times indeed, with both lives and livelihood at the stake. I'm really glad that you still could make it. Let me first pray for the well-being of you and all yours before any technical session from me. Informal or formal, All discussions as we see today are on curves. Two essentially, two types of curves, shape of both going entirely in a direction opposite to our desires. The shape of the curve of economic recovery and that of COVID recovery. It is a tumultuous situation, no doubt, but we are also getting convinced of braving this by the innovative explosion in process, technology, strategies already launched by the enterprises to wrestle this enemy down. Speakers today, from Pulak to Prashanjit, Mr. Uppal, have portrayed different dimensions of the problems and the solutions. The macros of the world, a knowledge which is essential, to the micros within the organization and best practices that educate also others. Learning, market intelligence, best practices, competitive collaboration, sharing, all will help the businesses to survive this. We did one webinar a few weeks back on a broader topic of post-COVID supply chain management. The poll has shown that working capital, cash war room, and digital were the three main asks from the corporate. Our narrative today is around those three. What is a consultant's take on this mitigation path of the crisis? We advocate for a robust operating precept, which we strongly feel is critical for such crisis management. Problems are all known to you, more intently than us possibly. But the conundrums for practicing experts like you could be how to analyze the interrelationship amongst all these diverging factors and set a robust and balancing operating framework in this new normal. The journey will have three stages, three cycles of survival. Revival. Survival, struggling to make the many ends meet, keep the basics on. Then on to steady and stable, when one gets into familiarization with the new normal. Tentatively back to profit, new products, new processes, experimenting very cautiously on new ventures, and then thrive. Back to growth, bold decisions, penchant for further market capitalization, flourishing, good old days back again. Our consulting implementation methodology postulates four framework: supply chain risk management, financial planning, capital investment, and an overarching one, digital. The present webinar revolves around the survival phase only and focuses on the moot problem of this phase, the working capital management, the cash. How to manage the cash. Enhance liquidity, not by borrowing, but by internal capital. What will 4-point framework now aim to resolve? Let's take a look at the challenges one will face now regarding cash and capital. The two main challenged elements now. We see symptoms like sub-optimized or unoptimized cash-to-cash cycle, the imbalance between the payables and the receivables, unmonetized assets, soaring DIO, DPO, DSO, etc., all leading to a debt trap. The challenges arise from the cross-functional anomaly with no single converging goal, and a 4-point framework provides that calculated balance across the enterprise with only one goal: optimize the cash. There are various nodes in an organization, as we have analyzed, nodes which directly or indirectly control the consumption of cash or accrual. The framework identifies those nodes or the actors, formulates how each of those can be acted upon to balance the inflow and the outflow of the cash, like a revised credit rating of the trade partner, alternate sourcing, contract negotiation, dynamic discounting, monetizing of the unutilized assets, and many other critical handlers which the other speakers have already referred to, but they have to be systematically identified. All these also call for a very robust digitalization, a data-driven approach which gives intelligence, real-time insight, prediction, correlation, modeling, providing an automated and consistent enabler to such balancing. How to achieve that framework, which could be exhaustive, so exhaustive, on picking up all contributing factors to this cash balancing? We take a 3-step approach. Set a baseline, set the digitally enabled cash war room, and set a resilient supply chain. What does one get in this baseline exercise? Let's take a look at that. This exercise quickly ascertains the scenario. boundary conditions of the operations, sets the KPIs, sets targets, sets methods of the rolling forecast, a complex task because of the swiftly changing scenarios, sets methods of stress testing, and defines the baseline for the central item, the cash war room. As the cash war room is set up, enabled by digital, one sets up the internal workflow, optimization norms, controls, dashboards, red flags, feedback mechanism, and monitors all the interrelated cogs of the framework and their actions. We can see here some indicative items of the inflow and the outflow of the cash, not exhaustive surely, but one should aim is to lay down a well-defined financial planning and analysis, an FPA, which is a component of the financial framework that works on each of these sub-levers without missing a single item to set a continuous monitoring mechanism on how the balancing should be done. The success is achieved in the cash war room by the combination of quick hits, some very short-term tactical ones already referred to by some of the speakers, some more permanent changes to the process, and incisive technology intervention measures. We have picked a few actions under the three categories that help retaining the cash in the system and have given percentage benefits alongside. One should do that for all three levers of as the framework would suggest, the payables, the receivables, and the inventory. And the indicative percentages, which may vary, of course, depending on size, industry, level of discipline already there, can be used as guiding targets while setting these baseline up. That is what we always advocate for, a defined preset, a defined operating procedure, a framework. Tangible results will follow a proper definition and implementation of such precepts. Tangible results will surely follow that. I must also mention that the percentages alongside are very approximate, arrived through copious research and interviews with clients, either in the form of assignments or informal discussions. But added to that, agility and the resilience of the supply chain is a non-negotiable factor, as one will need to adjust all KPIs and the actions recommended by the cash war room or the financial framework while subjected to a complete different scenario arising from further crisis or dissipation of the crisis. Agility and the resilience comes with intelligent applications of the digitalization, use of combinatorial technology of all across, moving gradually towards Industry 4.0. A simplistic view of SCM to elucidate the point as we have seen it. Let's take a linear value chain of the movement of the goods. We have grouped the like boxes in a single shade and tried putting down percentages of savings potential from these boxes with planned induction of technology. This is in accordance with the numbers that we have given in the previous slides also, shown here just from a different angle. One should define the exact intuition points of the technology and what types of technology here. And possibly here I can just take a little liberty of adding that our deliverables, which is the 4P framework produced by our three-step approach, deliver at this very point the technology landscape of the survive and the sustain phase. Now at the end, let's put all together. Our three-step approach resulting in the delivery and implementation of the 4 frameworks, which are broken into subtasks, which are put into 3 different colors representing the right resources the 3 parties in this partnership bring in. You can see the colors of Amplo, Inturi, and Trinamics in the logo, and those colors also outline what they will be bringing in. So what does a client finally achieve? It begets a sustainable method to continuously improve the working capital situation arrived through the 4-point framework. The combination of the 3 partners brings the definition of the process, rolling out of appropriate tools for the baseline and the cash war room, and implementation in digitalization in tranches across the value chain. Finally, it is the cash, the king, that needs to be protected, and not just against one sporadic onslaught, but continuously against all that may happen in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dasgupta. So we will hand over for the Q&A session to Mr. Ravi Prasad. Please go ahead, Ravi. You're on mute, Ravi. Ravi, you're on mute. So just if you can.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Great. All right. So this has been really a productive session so far, and all the panelists have shared some great insights. as well as actionable framework to unlock cash for supply chain resilience post-COVID disruption. This session is being attended by professionals from supply chain, finance, and IT, and we have got really great questions from many of you. It's very difficult for me to pick among so many great questions, interesting questions that's coming through chat to private windows to me, as well as in our Q&A section. So what I've done, I've picked up some of those questions and clubbed them all the relevant one. And I'll be asking our panelists in the order they spoke, which is relevant to their presentation topic. So I'll request the panelists to keep your response probably 2 to 3 minutes if possible. I know some of these questions are really do our best to keep it in 2 to 3 minutes. First question is to Mr. Rajesh Uppal. Sir, how are you managing the cascading effect of cash crunch and raw material shortage to tier 2 and tier 3 supply base?
I think
Is Mr. Rajesh Uppal there?
Yeah, Mr. Uppal is there.
Probably you will have to unmute him.
Yeah, I have unmuted him. Why don't we, Rajesh, you there?
Yeah, I need to log out because my other meeting has just started at 4 o'clock.
Sure.
I had a hard stop at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
So maybe Ambarish, you want to take that? There is a related question to that. Do you want to take that?
I think Mr. Uppal can stay till 4 o'clock. So there is one question for you, Mr. Uppal. Possibly you can take that. You can just repeat that question, Ravi.
Yeah, so question is for you, Mr. Rajesh Uppal. How are you managing the cascading effect of cash crunch and raw material shortage to tier 2 and tier 3 supply base?
Yeah, he has left. I think you can go to the other questions. We will get the answer back from Mr. Uppal later on. So to
sure. Yeah. So let me go to probably Dr. Pulak Ghosh. There are a couple of questions. One is that you were talking about lean supply chain. So what do you think of having importance to move to vendor managed inventory? And there is a related question, not really directly to VMI. It also says that, do you think there will be a lot of satellite manufacturing center and local sourcing as well as local dependence?
Yeah, so I strongly believe the local sourcing and the satellite-based vendor management is going to pick up. Now, whether they will sustain for long, that we don't know yet. But as you can see, that in the trying times, those units which has the local sourcing and the Kirana store connection intact, they did really well. For example, Big Basket has done much better than probably the other ones, because Big Basket local sourcing channels are a lot better, and they work more like a satellite kind of vendor management system. So this is probably going to be the new normal for a year or two. Now, obviously, the big player who actually works the other way around, who is more centralized and pool everybody in their central warehouse and then distribute it, they have big pockets. So whenever that the situation improves, that model may come back. But for a year or two, I think this is going to be the way.
Right. So there's one more. Actually, there are multiple questions for MSMEs. So there's a related one. So I'll take it one more with you, Dr. Pulak. That says that, as you said, that MSME needs to be helped with hand-holding. But we have seen large auto OEMs are actually pushing the MSME supplier hard to share the duty drawback benefit received from Government of India. In such scenario, what is the way out?
So, I mean, at this moment, those bottlenecks is very hard to resolve. So at this moment, what the government need to do is, while these processes needs to be figured out much, for example, even in the government side, I was talking with some semi-startup. There are 2 to 4 crore GST stuck up for 2 years directly with the government, right? So those bottlenecks need to be cleared up, but that will take time because there is a lot of process issue, legal issues are there. But I think what I meant by right now is next 6 to 8 months, MSME need to have a direct money from the government with more like what the United States has done. And that needs to be there for them to afloat and for at least give salaries to their employees.
Otherwise the whole ecosystem will break.
Agree.
Thank you. Thanks for your answer. Next question is for Mr. Prasenjit Sengupta. Since, sir, you talked about a lot of digital initiative within your organization for different areas. So do you see company having better digitalization of supply chain will have competitive advantage? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
See, with the situation that we are there in today, supply chain automation and supply chain digitization is definitely going to be on the cards for most of the companies. You see, when we talk about supply chain, we are actually talking about right from the vendor's perspective right down to the retailer's perspective. And if we are able to enhance the analytics around it, if we are able to enhance and understand the time that takes between each of the nodes of the supply chain, whether it is the time taken from the vendors, whether we are talking about the quality, whether we are talking about the distribution channel, whether we are talking about the stock levels, all this is going to be extremely important going forward, because we all know the just-in-time scenario, and it has been used very well in the manufacturing parlance. But unfortunately now, because of this situation, we will have to look at kind of a just-in-time for the entire supply chain. And that is going to be end-to-end. We need to look very closely and minutely at all the milk runs. We have to look at the optimizing our entire transportation logistics costs, the circles that we are going to make, the entire to and fro movement that we are going to make. Everything, I mean, every bit of the supply chain is going to come into scrutiny, and it is going to demand much higher automation and analytics, I would say. So I think, yes, this is going to be the need for the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prasenjit Sengupta. There is a couple of more. Do we have time? Can we take one more question?
I had to leave at 4. So
yeah, sure, no problem. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate states. It's been great insight from all the panelists. So really appreciate.
Sure.
What we'll do, I'll hand it over to Radhika to just do a key takeaways from summarizing all the presentation that we've done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so let me start with the takeaways. We have unpacked many layers in our webinar, and I want to take a minute to braid all the individual threads together into a final takeaway. We can start thinking about it from a 40,000 feet perspective that will give us the idea of the macroeconomic challenges that we face as a country. We understand that most players are focusing on quick fixes. They want to mitigate the supply chain risks through a diversified vendor base or strategic stock management. And the capacity shortage can be remedied by moving the product variety to a smaller variety and just reducing the mix altogether, moving from a modular manufacturing process to a more standardized one. We do understand the importance of the middleman, the madhyaratnas that connect the country to the informal micro businesses that will ultimately uplift our economy back to the way it was functioning. When we start moving to the next level of our thought process, we identified that we need to rethink the processes by keeping the resource and the people at the center. We need to start reimagining how we're contracting with our vendors and our suppliers, and we need to see if we can start making them smarter instead of making them very long-term relational interactions. We can start by releasing the clogs in the supply chain, by supporting our co-participants, and by maintaining our own solvency. We also can begin to realize how a solid approach is going to guide us through not only this crisis, but the many more to come. And we have seen that there are many technologies that are enabling across the value chain of a business in solving problems and coming up with tangible outcomes. But there is something to be lacking in the supply chain management still. This is where the trio of Intuary, Amplo, and Trinamix can come together and advise companies on building the right technology and the foundation to lead the way to gradual business transformation. We came in with a 4-point framework that included supply chain risk management, financial planning, and cash flow, capital investment, all encompassed by digital enablement. We used this framework to lead us into our 3-stage approach, implementation approach, that is, to set the baseline, create a war room, and finally build supply chain resilience to resolve not only the challenges for today, but for the years to come. Having a strong framework backed by a tactical approach defines the path that the entire organization walks on together. Calamities catch organizations off guard and can shake anyone to their core. But if we have a strong system in place, one that synergizes everyone's efforts in a focused way, we can pick ourselves up and return to the playing field. We all, as a trio, will delve into how organizations can repurpose into the new normal, and we'll be back to elaborate on how we can help companies stabilize themselves in a world that we don't recognize anymore. Hand it over back to you, Anirban.
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you, everyone, for the session today, for attending. So we will send out the presentation and the Q&A separately. Questions and answers. We'll try to publish the poll results as well. Thank you for staying back a little bit longer. So with that being said, I again want to thank you to all the panelists and the speakers, and have a good summer ahead. We will be in touch with the upcoming webinars. Thank you so much. Thank you.